In the early hours of October 8, 2002, Aileen Wuornos couldn't sleep. She sat on the thin, worn mattress in the execution cell, staring at the cold wall, knowing that only a few more hours remained. There was no sound, only the steady rhythm of her own breathing and the wall clock marking each passing second. Aileen Wuornos, the woman labeled as America's first female serial killer with the ironic nickname the Angel of Death, was living the final moments of her life. She had been convicted of killing Richard Mallory in 1992 and later confessed to 6 other murders. But strangely, unlike most death row inmates, Aileen didn't fear death. She welcomed it. For her, after a decade of suffering on death row, the death sentence was no longer punishment. It was liberation. After a lifetime of pain and violence, she saw death as her only way out. Aileen's last breakfast was no different from any other day on death row. Scrambled eggs, toast, and milk. A menu simple to the point of monotony, but she had long grown accustomed to it. Throughout the past year, Aileen had repeatedly accused prison staff of poisoning her food with dirt, saliva, and urine. She claimed to have overheard them plotting to force her to commit suicide or attack her before the execution date. These accusations reflected the disturbed mind of a woman who had endured too much trauma. According to psychological records, Aileen was diagnosed with persecutory delusions, a common symptom among death row inmates after years of living in complete isolation. But now, with only one day left to live, none of that mattered anymore. She had let go. At noon, Aileen received notification that 2 final legal efforts to stay her execution had failed. One appeal came from a lawyer in Tampa, the other from a human rights organization in Ohio. Both questioned her mental competency, whether she was lucid enough to fully understand the death sentence she faced. But what's notable is that Aileen herself had not fought this sentence. In fact, she had waived her right to appeal earlier in the year, urging the court to expedite the execution process. This move led many to question her sanity. Just a month earlier, Rag Singhal, Aileen's final defense attorney, had expressed serious concerns about his client's mental state. This prompted Governor Jeb Bush to issue a temporary stay to allow psychiatric experts to reevaluate her. But after 3 psychiatrists confirmed that Aileen understood her actions and the consequences of the sentence, the stay was lifted. "She knows exactly what she's doing," State Attorney John Tanner declared. As for Singhal, with a tone full of regret, he admitted, "It's a difficult day because no matter what, she still wants to die." For Aileen Wuornos, the ruling was not a defeat. It was the ending she had long awaited. At 3 p.m., with only about 18 hours left before her execution, Aileen Wuornos entered the interview room to meet filmmaker Nick Broomfield. This wasn't the first time they had met. Broomfield had made a documentary about her in 1992, and now he returned to capture the final moments of this woman's life for his new work, Aileen, Life and Death of a Serial Killer. In the weeks before, Aileen had shared with Broomfield her belief that she would be taken to meet God, Jesus Christ, the angels, and whatever exists in the world beyond. When she entered the room, she greeted him with a smile, pointing to her bright orange uniform. "Hi, Nick. How are you?" she asked. "I'm okay. How are you?" Broomfield replied. "Great." "Look at this orange shirt," she said, her tone almost cheerful, as if wearing the orange uniform reserved for death row inmates was something to be proud of. Broomfield asked about life in prison. "It's all right here," Aileen answered, her voice calm. "But you know, there's always issues with some staff. They don't like me. Maybe because I'm a serial killer." She laughed softly, but her eyes weren't happy. When asked if she had made friends in prison, Aileen admitted she lived in complete isolation. "No, I'm just alone in my cell. I don't even bother going outside anymore. There's nothing out there. I quit smoking too," Broomfield continued. "So what's your day like? How does it start?" Aileen looked up at the ceiling, as if searching for the right words. "I spend 24/7 in my cell. Watch TV, read the Bible, write letters to Dawn, sit around and think a lot. I'm preparing for my death. Looking back at the past, everything I've been through in life. And I'm draining all the tears out of me so when the execution comes, I won't cry anymore." She paused, swallowing. "You know, it's going to be very hard when I go," Broomfield asked, "draining out the tears?" "Yeah," she answered. "I don't want to be crying in the execution chamber, and I won't." But as the conversation shifted direction, Aileen's tone suddenly became dark. She began talking about being tortured. "Look, I was tortured at BCI," she said, her voice full of resentment. "They turned on the intercom system in the room and kept lying that it wasn't working. They used sound pressure on my head since 1997. A lot of food trays were poisoned. I had to wash all the food before eating. Then one day I didn't wash it, and I was sick for 3 weeks. Almost died." These accusations reflected the deep paranoia of a mind that had been imprisoned too long under harsh conditions. Mental health experts suggest that prolonged isolation on death row can cause serious psychiatric disorders, including hallucinations and persecutory delusions. In a chilling moment, she reaffirmed her readiness for death and made a final shocking accusation. "Let them know that I know the police knew who I was after Richard Mallory died. I left fingerprints everywhere, and they covered it up, let me kill the rest, turned me into a serial killer. I know they did it." Her anger erupted, and she unleashed it all on Broomfield, on society, on the entire system. "You all destroyed me. Society, the police, and the whole system. A woman about to be executed just to make books, make movies, and make money." As the camera continued rolling, she uttered her final words on screen. "Thanks, society, for railroading me." Then she stood up. "All right, let's go." Just a few hours after the tense interview, Aileen Wuornos returned to her cell in absolute silence. She spent her final time reflecting on her life and what lay ahead. Strangely, after the bursts of anger and frantic accusations in the interview, an odd calm began to envelop her. It was the kind of calm one can only achieve when they have completely accepted their fate. For many years, Aileen had persistently claimed that she killed those men in self-defense when they attacked and raped her while she was working as a prostitute on the empty roads of Florida. But later, she retracted her testimony, saying she wanted to make peace with God. "I am one who hated human life and would kill again," she admitted bluntly in another interview. After a decade living on death row, death had become something she eagerly awaited. In the final days, Aileen continued to complain about the prison's treatment. She spoke of being strip-searched, handcuffed too tightly, having staff bang on her cell door in the middle of the night, being checked through the window constantly, low water pressure when showering, a moldy mattress, and especially the vulgar taunts from male guards. "That's pure hatred directed at me," she described. Aileen even threatened to refuse food and bathing when certain officers were on duty. Her lawyer emphasized that his client only wanted to be treated like a human being until her final day. But according to reports from the prison, these were not objective complaints. Many experts believed Aileen was experiencing the final stages of severe mental disorder, where the line between reality and delusion had been completely blurred. Finally, after pouring out all her bitter words, Aileen lay down on the bed and fell asleep earlier than usual, as if surrendering to the inevitable. There were no phone calls, no visitors, no family, no friends. She had severed all those relationships long ago. Her mother had abandoned her as a child, leaving her to grow up under the cruel hand of her grandfather. Her father was a pedophile who committed suicide in prison. Her only brother had also died of cancer. Dawn, the person she once loved and considered a soulmate, had abandoned her immediately after her arrest, selling their story to Hollywood for money. Now, Aileen Wuornos was completely alone. Not a single person was with her in those final hours. That small, cold cell was the only place she had left. It was the final world of a woman who had once dreamed of being loved but only received violence and abandonment. And now, in absolute loneliness, she awaited death like an old friend. Aileen Wuornos woke up earlier than usual on the morning of October 9th, 2002, just a few hours before her execution. Prison spokesperson Sterling Ivy said she had requested a bath towel and washcloth to clean herself. This was the final ritual, her way of preparing to leave this world. By tradition, each death row inmate has the right to choose a final meal valued under $20, anything they want. But Aileen refused. She only drank a cup of black coffee, no sugar, no milk. Simple and bitter, just like her life. In those final hours, she counted down the time in silence and absolute solitude. Alone in the small cell, she lay down, sat up, read, relaxed, waiting for her fate to draw near. Around 9:30 in the morning, a crowd gathered outside the prison. There were supporters of the death penalty, and there were opponents. They carried banners, shouted slogans, debated with each other about justice, about mercy, about whether Aileen Wuornos deserved to live or not. But their numbers were overwhelmed by the police and guards standing watch around the area. Inside, Aileen was escorted from her cell to the execution chamber under strict guard supervision. When she entered the execution chamber, she was strapped tightly to the medical gurney. 2 IV lines were inserted into her arms, preparing to pump poison into her body. 32 witnesses held their breath as the heavy curtain slowly opened, revealing the image of Aileen lying on the execution bed. We can confirm that lethal injection is certainly a more humane way to end life compared to the electric chair. State Attorney John Tanner declared, the man who had prosecuted her from the beginning. In the final psychiatric evaluation, Aileen had expressed relief when Florida abolished execution by electric chair. In her final bizarre statement, Aileen said, "Yes, I just want to say I'm sailing with the Rock, and I'll be back like Independence Day with Jesus, June 6th, like the movie, big mothership and all. I'll be back. I'll be back." This strange declaration highlighted her disturbed mental state and was a chilling reminder of the complex psychology of a killer. Earlier, she had called on the Florida Supreme Court to proceed with the execution, declaring, "I want to cut everything short and get it over with. The taxpayers' money is being wasted, and the victims' families have suffered enough." Then, the execution process began. A guard pressed the button to release the lethal chemicals into Aileen's veins. She stared at the ceiling, swallowing continuously, eyes moist but showing no emotion. Each minute passed in absolute silence. Only the small hum of an air conditioner from the other side of the wall. None of the witnesses spoke, coughed, or sighed. The atmosphere in the room was heavy, stifling. Aileen's skin gradually turned pale gray as the poison did its work. After about 8 minutes, the attending physician nodded when the warden asked if she was dead. The warden picked up the phone, presumably to notify the governor, though no one could hear his words because the sound system had been cut after Aileen's final statement. With a second nod, the curtain was drawn. Aileen Wuornos was officially pronounced dead at 9:47 a.m. She was 46 years old. The reaction to her death was deeply divided. Some believed executing her was justice being served. Others saw it as the tragic end of a life filled with turmoil, shaped by violence and abandonment, a life that descended into darkness and led to serial murders. Aileen Wuornos was born into poverty, grew up in violence, was sexually abused as a child, became a prostitute to survive, and ultimately became a killer. The question remains, was she a cold-blooded murderer or a victim of circumstances who never had a chance at redemption?